Hello, everybody. Welcome to Maker's Bar, where we are creating 1 million leaders. I'm Troy Goldenberg. I'm your host today, and we are with Aayush, the founder and CEO of Kniru. They are redoing the way you do finance with the help of AI. Aayush, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to hear about your story, your company, and how you got the idea, your background, all of it. So, with all of that, tell me about your early life, your early career, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I did my born and brought up in India. Did all my education there, but then for undergrad came to the US after standard work. Interned at Citadel. So worked as a quant researcher at Citadel very early in my career. Made I was part of the team for Ken Griffin that made his money and managed his money. Ken Griffin is the founder of Citadel and also the 30th richest person on the planet. So learned a lot about how finance is being managed using a lot of AI at that place. A lot of those lessons transferred to Kniru. But after that, realized that I wanted to have a bigger impact footprint, and the best way to do that was to do startups. Did worked at two startups. First startup, Gordian Software, joined them as their 11th employee. Worked there. After that, joined Clean Lab. Worked there as their 5th employee. Worked a lot there. Both startups really highly valued today. Gordian is one of the top 200 most valued YC startups. Clean Lab recently raised 25 million Series A. So yeah, that was the early career. Built Kniru actually for myself when I was at University of Washington. Lost a lot of money while I was being in classes. So just wanted to have some AI agent that can manage my finances. And then one thing led to the other, and then now it's a startup.
Wow, very cool. So this was a invention that was really just for you, just to manage your own assets.
Yeah. So we actually it was not even something meant to be a startup. We basically built it like a very ugly front end with like a back end powering it, connecting it with Reddit, Twitter, and all of that stuff. Similar to how Citadel was doing it, very copied style, and so that it can just manage my finances. And just over time, my friends knew that it was just making so much money for me that my friends wanted access to it. And so then some legal changes happened in India last year, so I just had the chance to make this as a startup in India. So now we are in multiple countries, but that's like the legal changes, and the timing was just so perfect that we went ahead with this and made it like a startup.
Very cool, very cool. And on that note, as we're talking about what it was doing for you and your friends, what does your company do? What does your product do here?
Yeah, so what we were doing before and what we do now is completely different. But we are on a mission to put a financial advisor in every human's pocket on this planet, because financial literacy is just so bad across the world that we are trying to solve that. What Kniru does for you is it connects seamlessly with all your financial accounts, and then all the standard stuff that you expect from a personal finance product, budgeting goals, all of that we do. But there are a few USPs that we do for you. One of that is we replace your human financial advisor, which means if there is something you can ask your human financial advisor, you can ask that question to Kniru. This involves tax advice, retirement advice, investments advice, and all of this is hyper personalized to you. So that is number one. And the second part of the story that most people miss out on is we started building this because financial literacy is so low, and asking the right questions is a sign of genius, right? So most people don't even know what questions to ask. And what we do is Kniru comes to you with what you should be doing through a hyper personalized insights and a notification system. This means that let's say you are invested in Tesla and some negative chatter starts happening on Twitter about Tesla. Kniru will come to you with a notification in real time with a summary. Hey, here's what's happening. Here's how you should be thinking about it. Here's what you should be doing. This not is only is limited to investments, but it's also like expense management. So let's say you are a student who's making $15,000 per year in part time, and if you're buying 2 cups of Starbucks a day, it's completely unsustainable. So what we would do is not just tell you that you should be spending less on coffee. What we'll do instead is we'll give you, hey Troy, here is you are spending a lot on coffee. Here is the link to the exact Amazon machine that you should be buying to reduce your expenses. So
Wow.
that is why we call it not personalized but hyper personalized. A lot of this is in beta. So you mentioned that you use the app. It's not in your version, but we have like 100 users in beta who are using all of this, and it's just mind blowing. So yeah, wait for it to
Very
come.
cool. You make it sound all so easy. It all came so natural. I'm sure there were tons of significant challenges. What were some of those significant challenges you faced as you began your path on the startup?
Yeah, so some of the major challenges were around compliance and regulations, plus also much major on technology. So I'll start with the smaller challenge, which was the regulation. We operate in a heavily regulated space. Uh, in the US, it's even actually a more open environment. So we started our journey from India, which is
Mhm.
10x or even 100x more regulated space. You can't even start till you have all the licenses in place. So we had to, just go for months and months figuring out all the licenses, and this was me just sitting in a dark room trying to read like these 200-page legal documents, figuring out how we can get the exact licenses. A much more closed system there, but an extraordinary fintech ecosystem nonetheless, but just a very hard or a barrier to entry is very high. So that was one of the challenges, but over time we just were patient about it. We knew this was the right thing to do because the risk is just so high to not do this correctly. We just took our time, did this correctly, figured out all the compliance in both the countries. One of the USPs, one of the advantages we had was I studied in the US, so I have a social security number. So it made it so much easier for me to be incorporated in both places, that we could just start a business faster here than there. So we just did here, and now we are license pending there. So our licenses are in a pending state there, but we figured out all the compliance there, and we launched here because it was just faster for me to do that. So that was like our like creative way to get a step up other than all the other startups over there. the second thing um, the second thing being around technology. So we realized very early on in our journey that making a wrapper around chat gpt, which is like what most of the startups in our space is doing, completely does not work out. So I'll not name the competitors, but some of our competitors created a wrapper, launched it in production, had to retrack it back after 2 months because the customers took screenshots, posted on Reddit, and they just had to roll back the product. uh, there's a fundamental problem with this, which is that LLMs are really not meant for quantitative tasks. They are kind of predicting the next token given the previous token, which means they're very good for creative tasks, and you will see most of them being applied to very creative tasks. But when it comes to quantitative tasks, you really have to be right. And in finance domain, that becomes even more important. And so we had to almost build up a lot of research, and that became, it became a very good thing that it became part of our DNA from a very early part of the company. So I'll tell you about a few things. One of the things is, for example, there are standard RAG architectures, which are like more of your technical viewers will know that RAG architectures are how a lot of the things that are being currently powered by LLMs sort of work. We had to reinvent a different style of RAG architecture. So one of my founding engineers pretty much read every RAG architecture, then like spent like a month figuring out the new architectures and just reinvented. It's closed source. We have not open sourced it, but we basically
Mhm.
create our own RAG architecture to be able to answer taxation questions. So that's like one thing. But then when it's like an investment domain, so taxation is a very closed domain, right? So there's not much creativity to it, but it's like a set pieces of rules that you have to know precisely to be able to do the thing. So rags work perfectly there. But when you think about investments as a space, it's a very creative space. Like there are all these people on Wall Street trying to be creative, so you need to be not just books but more than that. And for that kind of stuff, we had to build a lot of research in house. We have done like months and months of research building this in house. We have created thousands of tools. It's almost like imagine a hedge fund wrapped up in a library that's being invoked using your chat interface. So a lot of intelligence powering that. So building that was very hard. We partnered with a lot of players. For example, we are the first company in the world in any domain in production with something called Autogen, which is a package from Microsoft. We partnered with them. So this is a multi-agentic LLM system. And what this means is, imagine like 10 GPTs talking to each other just to understand what you want, and then lower down that tooling, trying to answer that. And this all happens instantaneously. So that's like a lot of the magic powering this.
Wow. Wow. That's all very impressive. And I'm impressed by your patience, your due diligence for all this. I'm sure it's as technical and mind blowing as all is. I'm sure it's even more in depth than I can even imagine. Um, Truly like, very incredible. I'm very curious already. Like, what do you see long term? What is your vision for the company as you move forward in the next year, 5 years, decade?
Yeah. So in the short run, our we want to build a 100x product. Right? People talk about these products. And in the personal finance space or the PFM space, there are all these very crowded market products where it's just like a 1% improvement on the existing product. A lot of people are positioning it from a UX improvement. That's not really good enough to make a great product in fintech space. But if you think about, if I ask you like the 100x products, right? Notion, Figma, Canva, all of these are products that completely changed the industries. So for example, if you think about Notion, who would have thought that documents were not solved, right? Microsoft solved documents, and then here comes Notion and completely changed the landscape. We want to build a 100x product in the short run. So we want to take every piece of thing, completely disrupt it, and then go forward with it. So I'll give you one example, right? In budgeting, what a lot of players have done is it's a very static budgeting system. If you ask for $3,000 a month, that means you have $100 a day, and that's what static means. But actually, humans do not work like this. If you set a budget for food, you want to have the money over the weekend so that you can like celebrate with your friends and family and have more money to be able to spend over going out.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the applications don't even consider this very minute thing, but a lot of people in the dieting space have solved this, right? They already know that people will miss out, right? So calories are exactly like so dieting and calories are exactly like money and budgeting. And
Yes.
taken a lot of parallels learned from that, build a reinforcement learning engine that's coming very soon. I think in the next month it's on our roadmap, where our budgeting systems know how to help you manage like budget properly. So if you said $3,000 as a budget, I'll not say to you that spend 100 every day. We will keep aside automatically a sum of money towards the weekend after we learn from you. So we'll give you 100, and then over time you will miss out on your targets, and then we'll automatically adjust your budgets to make it customized to your lifestyle. Very simple example, very doable. No one has done it yet. So these are the kinds of things, like we want to make 100x product because all the things are there, all the tooling is there, and it's possible. That's the short term goal. In the medium term goal, we want to become uh, almost a replacement for human financial advisors and more. So humans are really not meant to be doing these kinds of mathematical tasks. Now a lot of people rely on humans right now, and that's great. We trust that humans should be in the loop for now. But if you think in the long run, what a lot of hedge funds figured out is they hire a lot of math geniuses to do research for them, but they never let them execute. They have these systems that execute because they want to take the emotion and the human error out of it. That's
Mm-hmm.
sort of how finance is supposed to be. It's like it's a completely made up field. Money is a made up concept, and so this should have been like something that systems should have driven. In the medium term, we want to give the ability for any human to have a hyper personalized financial advisor in their pocket. Uh, and there are lots of reasons why this really matters. Uh, for example, in the US, 4 out of 10 people can't even cover a $400 emergency expense, according to the Fed in 2020. This means if you live on the West Coast and you have a family member on the East Coast and they are sick, you can't make a round trip in an emergency situation. This is for 40% of Americans, right? So or actually, this is for 60% of the Americans. Only 40% can do it. So it's like a really dire situation, and it's not something just about the US. Right? It's across the world. So in India, for example, for a $1.4 billion population, there are 1,200 human financial advisors. That's it. And so
Oh,
there are no human financial advisors. So every geography is suffering with its own set of problems. Somewhere there are none. In the US, for example, if you think about that, there are 18,000 human financial advisors roughly, but the average yearly retainer is $7,500 as per NerdWallet. It's completely unsustainable to be able to employ these people. So in the short term, we want to solve this gap problem, the supply demand problem, the ability to have a mathematically optimized human financial advisor replacement in your pocket, which can do even better, even if you could afford a human financial advisor. That's the short term goal, and then we have a lot of long term business goals. I think every fintech's dream at some point is to become the largest bank in the world. That's sort of like how every fintech dreams.
mhm.
A lot of in that directions, but I think we want to enter the underwriting space in loans and insurance in the very very long term space, because those are very big markets, and a lot of things to be disrupted there. For example, insurance is just such a horrible space from a claim and all of that perspective. AI can completely solve that, and that's like sort of on our long term plan. And the conversations that you do with the AI, if you do enable it and if you say yes, that hey, help me get a loan, that conversation after your approval can be really used to figure out what kind of a person you are, should you be given a loan or not. And so that is sort of like the very very long term plan. But yeah, hopefully that gives like a rough roadmap.
Yeah, no, that's all very cool. I mean, I could tell you're ambitious from the first second I talked to you, but I love the way that you're able to, again, the patience thing, that you're able to lay out all these steps and understand the difference between your short term goals, medium term, long term, and just the amount of passion you have going into this. Like, not just that you're so technically adept, but you know these little facts of how many financial advisors exist in India, how many financial advisors exist in America, the financial situations of most Americans. Like, I can see the passion, I can feel the passion as you're speaking and coming through. Uh, on your way to that long-term goal, there's going to be a lot of risk. There's going to be a lot that could go wrong. So, what is your approach to risk in your business as you're building this up?
Yeah, so I don't think of risk in terms of like it's risk if you have very short term and if goals, and if you cannot have patience. But I think there is an aspect to things and there is an output aspect to things. So one of the things that I tell my team is to move really fast and execute really fast, get sort of compliance and do the right things, right? So for example, Steve Jobs says that do the right things at the top line, right? Kind of a similar approach but done in a different way. So do the compliance right, take your time. I'll tell you one of the like one example. So there was this one gentleman, I was doing an interview like this, and he told me in a very public forum that if you build something of AI and taxation, I promise you, you will go to jail because it will get it wrong, and then you will go to jail. I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. We'll do something. We'll figure out a way. So I think if you do the right things, if you take the customers along with the journey, uh, one of the things that I have learned over this time is what customers hate is if you bullshit them, right? If you tell them that this product works like this and it really does not, then the customer really gets mad at you. But if you're upfront about it, that we are trying to disrupt this thing, it will take a lot of time, but please come along the journey with us and we'll do the right things. Customers really trust you after that. You just have to be very honest to your customers, to your team members, and that's the approach we have taken. And I think the risk completely goes away if we are just moving very fast, executing at the top of the notch, and we take the customers along with us. We tell them what we are doing, what's the right thing to do, and then getting compliance really right. So anyone who's thinking about fintech, they must get compliance right. There are no shortcuts in compliance. If so, for example, and this is very geography dependent, but at least for example in India, if you get it wrong once, it's game over, right? Like you don't have like a second chance. Even here, like SEC, right? SEC gives you a chance to become big enough, right? They're like a bit nicer, but once you become big enough, if you do not do the right things, game over, like this. So just get compliance right. And I think other than that, I do not consider risk because um, I don't want to rush this. I do not have any personal short term goals. I just want to get this thing right. I come from a good background. I do not. I think I got like a bit of a luxury from the family side. Got lucky in that sense. So I do not think I have any rush on what I'm trying to do from a outcome perspective. But from an income perspective, I want to rush, right? So that's sort of like do a lot of hard work. Do not expect outcome to be really rushed.
No, I love that. There's actually, you went to Washington. There's a West Coast. Um, he was a hedge fund guy. I can't remember his name. Went to Stanford. I wish I remembered his name. He gave a really good speech to a graduating MBA class, and he talked about the four keys to success for him, and one of them was you do your thing, and you do it for decades,
Yeah.
and over the decades, as long as you stay committed, work hard, all those things, you'll see the results. You just will. Then it sounds like you just have the perfect mindset and a perfect approach for all of this. You mentioned your team and how you tell your team to approach their work and to work quickly. I am curious, as this is Maker's Bar and we speak to leaders, what is your leadership style? How do you cultivate your team culture? And when you're thinking about that, and when you're implementing that, how really do you go about that? And again, what's the style? What are some tenets that you kind of hold your team to?
Yeah, I'm so honestly I'm still figuring it out, very early in my career, but I'll tell you what I have figured out so far. So I've seen a lot of people who are like two founders or three founders, and I'm a single full-time solo founder of this company, which means there are some things which I have to pick right. So for example, I've seen a lot of founding teams work where there's like one is a bad cop, one is a good cop. Those kinds of styles do not really work for me. I'm like a single person. So what I've learned about like operating a team and building an organization is really just being brutally honest to my team. So that's the style I have picked. So sometimes they see me being the nicest person, sometimes they hate me because I just have the bar for the product so high. And then when something looks ugly, I'm like, this is ugly, and right. And so like as engineers, and I'm an engineer, so we treat our product as our kid. And when you say something to an engineer like your product is ugly, they're like, fuck you, right? I don't know if you can put this on the video, but yeah. So I think the thing that I have learned is being really honest to my team. In the short term, they can hate you, but they go home, they sleep, and they realize that, we are all fighting for the end user. And so I keep saying this to my team always. uh, as long as we have love for each other and we know that we are doing the right things, and I set this precedence on like onboarding, like we will have the most heated debates. Always remember that the teams that fight with each other are not fighting with each other, they're fighting for the user. And as long as we all know that and we respect each other from a competence perspective, everything else will be fine. And I think that is the thing we have done in our hiring constantly, that we hire some of the top talents. We take like, I remember like I probably interview like 200, 300 people just to have my first hire. So it takes a really long time to get the right people on the ship. Once we do, I think we fight with each other. They hate me, I hate them sometimes. We love each other, but we all come together the next day and we know that, we are just fighting for the customer. And the last night's heated debate was for the user. So that's like one of the things I've learned, that generally a lot of, I think I had to introspect a lot about my style. Like, what do I want to do? Like, do I always want to be nice? Do I always want to be this rude guy? And I think I learned that just being honest is what works the best for me, and the team like respects that aspect. So that is one. But then other than that, I'm an engineer, so I what I do is like I also code 16, 17 hours a day almost right now. Other than all the other things, I don't get to sleep much these days. But so I think a lot of the team respects that aspect also. When you are down and executing with their team, I've seen a lot of founders set very high bars but not really execute themselves, and that is where it kind of does not work out. You also have to execute really, really, really fast, and it doesn't mean that you just have to build, right? Engineering, I do a lot more than just engineering, although engineering is what is required to me right now. But um, actually executing and doing the things also yourself is very important. So I'm like the first one to come in office. I always like, sometimes I'm like 18, 19 hours in office, sometimes I sleep 3 days in office. So that kind of shows to the team that I also really care. And I think those are a few things that I have learned about my personal style that you asked. And then there are also a lot of principles that we all value as a team. So I'll give you a few of those. For example, we have a really no blame culture. One of the things that we all as a team really care about is building a no blame culture. I've seen a lot of great teams go down because they just have, whenever something goes wrong, it's like, I did the right thing, this guy screwed up, right? That's not how we appreciate things in the team. uh, it's if you've so one of my the CEO of Gordian, my first company, he gave me this book, Extreme Ownership. And this like by Jocko Willing, where he talks about everything that goes right is my team's success, and everything that goes wrong is my fault as a leader. So that's sort of like the kind of, I tell everyone, because they will all become leaders in the team, that kind of really own up to that. You have to really feel that, right? And when you do that, there is no blame culture. That is number one. And then teams really cannot move fast enough if you make that blame culture, because then when what happens when you do that is, then everyone just wants to do their own job. They do not want to go above and beyond, because there is so much chance of error that people, if there is blame culture, do not want to push boundaries. So we have kind of made these things very clear in the company. We have no blame culture. People should move really fast. Everyone is empowered to make decisions, repeated. I always say, make smarter mistakes, right? Like every time make the mistakes smarter and smarter, but make mistakes, that's okay. And then we are extremely data obsessed as a team, right? So we also allow and flourish this, anyone can make the final decision, because we are super data obsessed. So I do not have to be there to be making the decisions. Everyone is empowered to make decisions. There is this quote, right? Very, very famous quote: in God we trust, all else must bring data, right? So like it's sort of that. If you have the data, if you are doing the right things, go forward and just execute. So that is sort of like roughly the culture. But then a lot of the culture also is taken from my past startups. So they had, like, for example, Gordian had extreme ownership, but then they called it ownership, impact, and accountability. Just empowering everyone is like a very good thing for startups to do. So that is what we had done. Honesty is something I learned from my founder at Clean Lab. Curtis, the founder of Clean Lab, is extremely honest as a guy. Like sometimes you are like, why are you saying this to me? But he's like extremely honest, and that really works. So all of those things I've picked up from all these great founders. But yeah, that's pretty much my style.
No, I love it. I love it. Have you ever heard of a book called Principles by Ray Dalio?
Yes, I have, and I have read like half of it, and then yeah, it was like I was listening to the audiobook on the flight, and then the flight landed. But I have listened
Oh
to
yeah,
half.
so actually I also listen. So that's funny. I listen to most of it on planes myself, but it reminds me of that of the honesty, just extreme honesty. You don't have to be cruel, but you want to be honest. And it sounds like it's something that is a true pillar of your company that in your culture that you've built is honesty with each other, honesty with the customer, and you've seen that breed success for you. And there's also wow, I am blanking on names today, but there was a very famous head basketball coach for UCLA back in the day, UCLA Bruins, John Wooden.
Mm.
One of his most famous quotes is "Be quick, but don't hurry." So that's kind of one of those quotes that I recalled as you were talking about the different values that you have. You also mentioned a book, Extreme Ownership. I think it's a great book myself. And you mentioned your past companies that you learned from them. You learned from their leaders. Are there any other mentors, books, courses that have been very instrumental for you in your personal and or professional growth?
I think rather than the books, I learn more from humans. But the one person that I miss, probably the most instrumental in my like style, is Joe. So he's the CT. So I mentioned about the CEO of Gordian, but the CTO of Gordian, Joe. So I directly worked with him because of being on the technical side of things. I learned a lot about his style, which whenever I spoke with anyone on the engineering team, I think half the people were on the engineering team because it's like that Joe magic in the air. And then I tried to reverse engineer what was he doing right. He was the kindest and nicest guy, but he was like very brutally honest. And so that was one thing. Uh, but then he was just an extraordinary engineer, like extraordinary engineer, one of the magicians at code. And I think when the team knows that, so I've seen a lot of times where the engineers are a lot better than the CTO, and they should be like, teams should be striving to have every next hire being really good. But uh, Joe was just such a impeccable engineer, like everyone respected him for his ability to execute. And then there was this thing where there was this one time where I like just had this extreme respect for him. So there were a lot of fires, right? Everything breaks all the time. And we've seen Joe not sleep for like hours and hours. And so there was this one time where he was at a hotel, and we were on call. So like me and another member was on call, and then the servers broke down. And so I was like, okay, we need to escalate this. I do not have the context on how to fix this. So I escalated. We kept escalating to every member, and then almost the entire team was there, right? So there was like this hierarchy. But then we had to get Joe on the call. And so he was in a hotel on a retreat. So we basically called, we couldn't connect with him, so we called his hotel to get in touch with him. Like we were just like, everything is on the table right now, do anything, we need to get in touch with him. So we called him, and then somehow so convinced the hotel to like, please connect us with him. He was like, not in our policy, like this really matters, connect us. And like we got
Yeah.
him. And I was like, because it was just so screwed up, there would be, and he at this point has not slept for like I think 2 days. And then one of our engineers who was in the hotel with him, he was like, I saw Joe, and then he was super tired. I cannot find him right now. And so I expected an initial reaction of like, you guys screwed up, but okay, now I will take care of things. But like that initial anger for like a microsecond was what I expected. And he was like, you could see in him like extreme tiredness, extremely dead. And then he just smiled, and he just got to work, and he built, right? And so that is one time I like got complete respect for Joe. And so I think a lot of these things, which I do not know how to break down into keywords, but there are these styles of leadership where you just do the right things again and again and again. And so I think that was one of the things where I learned a lot from his style. And then after that, over time, I just kind of followed him, looked at him a lot. What is he doing? How would Joe do this? So I always think in my head, like, how would Joe act in this scenario, and how would Stephen act in this scenario? And I will just like take sort of like mental voting of all the founders I have seen in the past. Okay, how will all of these three do it in this scenario? Okay, and now who am I? How do I do it in my style? So I think that has helped a lot. But he was an extraordinary mentor. I think everything I know about engineering is like 90% from him. But yeah.
Very cool. I love that story. I love that story. Uh, it's crazy. You never know what day you're going to wake up. There's going to be a huge impact on you as a person and you as a professional. Um, and it sounds like that day and Joe, just throughout your tenure working with him, had that huge impact on you. And you really got to see how to lead by example. It's very cool. I really do love stories like that. Uh, and kind of on that note, how have you? I know that you're young. You are very young, which is very impressive, by the way. I don't think I've mentioned that. I'm extremely impressed by how young you are and everything you've accomplished so far, and your vision, your maturity. Speaking with you for only half an hour now, I get to see how mature you are, especially for your age as a leader. How has all that to say? how has your leadership style, how have you grown as a leader? Like what have you really noticed about yourself now versus maybe 5 years ago? I was like, oh wow, that was a huge piece of growth for me outside of your hard skills. Obviously, you're a much better engineer now than you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Mhm. I think I've become a lot more patient and lot less angry. Uh, I realized that for example, sometimes even in my past company, I used to manage people much older than me, and also at Kniru, I have this position of power where, although there are a lot of people much older than me, much senior in their career, that I get to have a conversation from a position of power. And although what I do holds some substance, but being less angry has helped it, I think. So I've tried to be, more mindful of uh, I heard this thing somewhere that no one wakes up in the morning to do the wrong stuff, right? Like everyone wants to do great things in their day, but it's just that people are coming at with different skill levels, different things that they are good at, and it's your job to find where they are the most productive, right? So, but one thing that I think a lot of people, founders especially, like very, so that my core nature is being, very obsessive, very aggressive, and then that core nature kind of sometimes tends to forget that, like, people really want to do the right things. No one wakes up to do the wrong things. It's just that it's going to take some time, maybe the skill level is not there. My job is to help people. So I think a lot of that lesson over time came into me, that now I have to, although I have this power, I have to be mindful about that. When I say something, it comes from a position of power, so I cannot abuse that, right? So that is sort of what I've learned. Of course, in engineering, like when you code 18 hours a day, 7 days a week non-stop, it's you just become a better engineer. So of course that is what has happened, of course. uh, but yeah, and then also I've learned a lot about hiring, right? Hiring in limited resources is so tough. And then for example, if you have limited resources and you're hiring, which was like the initial days, uh, and you still want to make sure that you do not hire like any BC players, you want to make sure that you have the best of the best. You have to tell stories every single hour of the day, right? So I remember when we were hiring our first engineer, I was like on interviews from 7 a.m. till like 1 a.m., like all day. And it was like
Wow.
back to back to back to back, no breaks, back to back. I didn't eat. And like there were times I threw up blood because like my vocal cords burst. So I had to go to doctor for that day. And like they told me to take like after every 5 meetings, take a break. But I think a lot of people underestimate how tough hiring is, and that is what I learned. So I never knew that when my founders were, working so much to get this hiring right. If you are really, really, really obsessed about getting the right people, hiring is supposed to be what you spend so much of your time on as a founder. And that's like a few lessons that I have learned. Become I've become a better like recruiter now. I know my tricks and how to find the right people. But yeah. I think those are the major lessons I've had: more patience, more control over anger, more nicer to people, but never letting the bar of the product go down. And keep how do you keep the bar and the conversation really high and yet become kind is a very hard skill, right? Either you can be a Steve Jobs styles where you become bar is high, you have to be a jerk, or like other styles where you have to be, like you are very passive, and then a lot of what you want for the product gets like milder. But how do you balance this way? Bar of the product is super high, you as a human can be kinder, and combining those was like a thing I had to figure out. And everyone can find their own styles around that.
Yeah, that's definitely more of an art than a science as far as finding that balance. Something that is extremely, I wouldn't say extremely unique in founders, but extremely unique in people, is this ability to work their ass off. And I gotta admit, I've never heard anyone talk so much interviewing to find the right people that they started bleeding. The vocal cords started bleeding. That is wild. That's a crazy story. I'm extremely impressed. And as we've spoken here, it's every story I'm hearing from you is like, we're working this hard, working so long. Um, is that something that you built up? Is that something that you kind of had as a kid in school? Where does this incredible work ethic come from?
I think it was a lot of seeing my dad. My dad is incredibly at what he does. So he started from ground up, like from very humble beginnings, had nothing of his own, built a very big business. He's like a couple $1 million big business. So I think the zero to that journey is like a very, and he's not technical by the way, he only has management skills. So like I saw him building an electric generator and power business with no technical capabilities. sheer amount of hard work. I would see him sometimes come at like 2 a.m. at night and then leave at like 6 a.m. I'm like, whoa. So I think a lot of that, and it's like a lot of the things I saw in my family, a lot of hardworking people in the family, a lot of business people learned from that. My dad is like 54 today. There are marathons in my city back home, and he's like ranked one right now, like a few months ago, in any age category. He was like not just his age of 54, but like any, so he's like defeating people at age of like 25, 26. He wakes up at like 4 a.m, goes and works out till like 9 a.m, and he has like this whole routine of swimming, cycling, and all of that triathlon thing. I think a lot of it was bred up very early from childhood, seeing my dad and everyone works so hard. And also it's like, I think, so there was this exam called IITs, which is like one of the most difficult exams in India. I studied for that. It was like there are like only 10,000 seats, so a lot of that also bred that psychology of working really really hard. uh, I do think there is like a lot of respect for people looking for work life balance. That's just like not what I have found myself to be happy at. So I always preach people should be doing what works best for them. I do not preach people to be working 16, 18 hours a day, but I think I have found myself to be the happiest when I work a lot, because when I sleep after that, it's like I sleep like a baby after that. So it's like the happiest sleep. So I do
Me too. Yeah, no, everyone has to find the balance that works for them, but I think most of us really are trying to find ways like, hey, how do I become more efficient? How do I work harder? Uh, at least I would say probably the average person. That's what they're really after, trying to get this work ethic that you have. It's very impressive, very incredible. And your dad's a very impressive guy too. Not only has he built this huge business, yeah, I'm going to be very serious with my fitness now, and I'm going to go do this 5 hours a day. It's just all of it's very incredible. It's just very inspiring to be able to talk with you. Appreciate you coming on, and on one of the critical skills on that note, one of the critical skills of being a successful entrepreneur is clearly working hard, and clearly you have that skill. But in your opinion, what are some of the most critical skills other than the hard work that an entrepreneur needs to be successful?
Hmm. I think I think relentless pursuit of the vision. Sometimes, like when you are operating in a short term, so we operate as a company like month to month goals, and then we have like a very big term goal. And then oftentimes it becomes like, okay, some fires happen all the time, right? Like that's part of the job. Losing that sight and getting disbelief in the longer vision. And I've had like those doubts cripple up in my mind sometimes, and you have to really kill them like head on. You cannot afford to lose belief in the long term mission. So I think anyone doing a start, we have to have relentless belief in what you are doing. It cannot be 99%. It has to be that it will happen. It has to be 100%. So I think that is one skill. Hard work, as you mentioned, it's almost, your persistence has to almost borderline enter into stubbornness, and then it has to just like play with that boundary. Like you have to be stubborn at the right things, you have to like be flexible with the other right things. So execution, like how you get there can be a little bit flexible, but you have to really really be stubborn about the vision, what you are trying to do. You have to correct your mistakes. So I do not know what is the right way to say this, but oftentimes if you become too stubborn, then you become like this, you are living in a fake and void world where you are not learning from the data that is coming to you. So that is never what you should be doing. You should be learning from the data on what is the right path to get there. But the belief on what the world will look like 10 years from now, that you imagine, you have to really hold on to that if you really have some sort of like intuition around that. So I think a lot of intuition and then holding on to that intuition, that is right for founders at least, is the right way to go in my opinion. So yeah, I think that is what I think founders should do. Just be very persistent. And then there are a lot of skills, so founders, there are a lot of skills that founders can learn. So I think one of the things we discussed was around recruiting. I had no clue how to do recruiting or hiring, right? Like I had to just pick all of that up. So there are all these tricks of the trade that you have to pick up, and everyone can very quickly learn those. But there are some things where you have to become very obsessed about, and then vision, I think, is the obsession. The where we are going is sort of the obsession.
Yeah, there's a pretty famous saying of stubborn on vision, flexible on detail.
Hmm.
As you mentioned, when the data comes in, it's really important to be able to take that data and change. Just change with what needs to be changed. And as we make plans, God laughs, and you have to readjust all of that. Absolutely, I agree completely. And
So one of the things there
yeah,
is, I remember this story from Tableau, right? So Tableau, the data
yeah, yeah,
visualization company, one of their, I think COO or something, was our marketing professor at University of Washington, and she was giving this story in our entrepreneurship class where they had like a $150 million contract that was being pitched to them, and I do not remember the exact details, but almost the entire sales team wanted to sort of take this because it would have, this was very early days in Tableau, and they would have had this massive success, and then she had to say no, and then everyone hated her for months. And that is why Tableau is, and she kind of says that Tableau is a $1 billion company because one of my key decisions at that point was, like saying no to that contract. If we would have built the things that we would have asked, that the customer asked, we would have been a different company. So I think that is like a very good example I remember in my head of what it means. Like you have to almost say no to $150 million, right? Like that's a massive no. So
yeah. It's a massive no.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. No, I very impressive young man. I'm a young man too, but you're very impressive. Like just your character, your work ethic, everything about you. The more I learn from you, like wow, it's all just truly incredible, man. Like, very truly. Uh, and finally, with what you've learned in your short but very successful, impressive career, what is some advice you would give someone that's wanting to start their own company?
I think just do it. Like I regret I started a bit late. There were like these 8 months where I was just going in my head whether I should do it or not do it or not. The moment I did it, it was the best decision I ever made. So if you know in your heart this is the right thing to do, like, go for it. Uh, Life is too short not to do something if you really believe in it. So go for it. Have a very high risk appetite. Look for data. Always look for data. That's the right way to approach anything. Trust your intuition. Work really hard. That's the only way to win. Both startups that I have seen win in my past, both worked like extraordinarily hard, all the founders but also all the founding teams. I think a lot of the times it gets missed that it's not just the founders who work really hard, but like all those 10, 15, 20, 25 people in the beginning, they are taking a massive cash cut, a massive risk with you, and they're also working almost harder than you sometimes. So like find those right people, get them on your team, and it will be a good journey, I think.
Amazing, amazing. I'm loving learning about your journey. I'm very excited to see your journey as it progresses over the next 5, 10 years, and to see where this ends up. I have no doubt it's going to be everything you imagine it to be. Being able to speak with you, I speak with a lot of founders and a lot of very impressive people, and you are right up there near the top. Truly, very incredibly impressive. And what is on deck here? Right, coming up in the next 6 months or so? What do you have on deck? What are the big goals?
So we are releasing. We have a lot of models that we have not released, but one of them is going next month. Uh, so you will see a lot of improvements on investments AI. We are releasing budgeting and goals as features. We are raising our seed round very soon. So all the investors out there, look out for us. But yeah, yeah, lots of features to come. Lots of customer conversations happening right now. To like lots of features in beta right now, which will be released to public very soon.
Very cool. Very cool. I have the app. I'm all connected. I've been exploring it, so I'll look forward to seeing that update when it comes.
Yep. Thank you.
Uh, Again, this is all incredibly impressive. Your journey, your story, just you as a person. It's been great to be able to learn from you, honestly, and truly, I look forward to staying in touch and seeing the growth. And I know there's going to be investors watching this because that's why we have this platform. It's one of our biggest things actually is VCs and founders like yourself. And I'm hopefully that we'll get a few thousand in here that can see this, and definitely want to reach out to you with the impressive product you've built, the team you've built, you as a founder, because at the end of the day, you're investing in people. And I honestly don't know who wouldn't want to invest with you. Being able to speak with you just for such a short time, I would definitely want to have you on here again, a year, 2 years from now, as this grows bigger and better, and just be able to hear the update. So Ayush, thank you so much for coming on, truly.
Thank you for having us. You are a truly kind host, but thank you so much for having us.
No, absolutely. I'm just being honest, I promise.